During my uncle's funeral, he sat up and asked for a glass of water. Mourners ran for the exits. Paramedics rushed in. He'd been in a coma so deep, doctors declared him dead. He remembered everything we said in our eulogies, including my cousin calling him cheap. The casket lid moved. At first, I thought I'd imagined it, a trick of the light, the kind of thing your brain invents when you've been staring at a dead body for 45 minutes, listening to people say nice things about a man half of them couldn't stand. Then it moved again. A hand, pale, liver-spotted, unmistakably alive, reached up and gripped the edge of the satin lining. Someone screamed. I think it was Aunt Patricia, or maybe it was me. My Uncle Richard sat up slowly, blinking against the fluorescent lights of Morrison and Sons funeral home, looking around at the flowers, the mourners, the giant photo of himself positioned next to the casket. Why is everyone dressed in black? His voice was hoarse, confused. Did someone die? The funeral director, a man named Gerald Morrison, who'd been in the business for 37 years, pressed himself flat against the wall. His face had gone completely gray. You were dead, he whispered. No pulse, no breathing. We checked. The doctors checked. You've been gone for 72 hours. Uncle Richard looked down at his suit, at the casket beneath him. At the funeral program, someone had dropped on the floor, his own face staring back from the cover. Well, he said slowly, apparently not. The room exploded. Chairs crashed over. People ran for the exits. Mrs. Chen, our neighbor for 30 years, fainted straight into a flower arrangement. The priest dropped his Bible and sprinted for the door like the devil himself had risen from the grave. And my cousin Derek, the one who'd just finished delivering a eulogy calling Uncle Richard, a man who knew the value of $1, sometimes to a fault, stood frozen at the podium, his notes still in his hand, his face the color of fresh snow, because Derek had said a lot more than that. And Uncle Richard, as we were about to learn, had heard every single word. Let me back up. My name is Maya Chen, 31 years old, high school English teacher, the person in my family who always got stuck mediating disputes, planning gatherings, and delivering bad news because I was good with words. Uncle Richard was my father's older brother, 73 years old, retired owner of Chen Industrial Supply, a company he'd built from nothing into a $12 million operation over 40 years. Widower, no children of his own, and, according to most of my family, the cheapest man who ever lived. This wasn't entirely fair. Uncle Richard was careful with money, yes. He drove a 15-year-old Honda Accord, clipped coupons until the day he died, wore the same rotation of polo shirts he'd bought in 1998, but he was also quietly generous in ways most people never saw. He'd paid for my college education, all 4 years, without ever telling anyone. When my dad's restaurant nearly went under in 2008, Uncle Richard wrote a check for $85,000 and called it a loan that he never collected. He donated anonymously to 3 different charities every Christmas. The problem was, the people who knew about his generosity weren't the ones who talked the loudest. The ones who talked were people like Derek Chen, my cousin, 35 years old, vice president of operations at Chen Industrial Supply, a position Uncle Richard had given him 8 years ago, despite Derek having no qualifications beyond sharing DNA. Derek drove a BMW, wore $400 shoes, took vacations to places I'd only seen in magazines, and complained constantly about how Uncle Richard never appreciated him, and how the old man was sitting on a fortune while family struggled. Derek wasn't struggling. Derek was living well beyond his means while skimming from the company. But I didn't know that yet. None of us did. Uncle Richard collapsed on a Tuesday evening. He was at home, alone, watching Jeopardy, his favorite show. The housekeeper found him the next morning, unresponsive on the living room floor. She called 911. Paramedics arrived within 7 minutes. They couldn't find a pulse. At Mercy General Hospital, Dr. Amara Okonkwo, attending physician, 23 years of practice, performed every test available. No brain activity, no heartbeat, no respiratory function. I'm sorry, she told my father at 3:47 p.m. on Wednesday. He's gone. Time of death, approximately 8:30 p.m. last night. She signed the death certificate herself. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday. 3 days to plan, notify relatives, and pretend that a family full of grudges and resentments could come together in grief. I should have known it wouldn't go smoothly. I just didn't expect the dead to have opinions about it. The viewing was Friday night. Uncle Richard looked peaceful in his casket. The funeral home had done good work. He looked like he was sleeping, not dead. The suit was his favorite, the navy one he'd worn to my graduation. Family filtered through all evening. My parents, my aunts and uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in years. Everyone said the appropriate things. He looked so peaceful. He lived a good life. He's with Aunt May now. And then there was Derek. I was standing near the guest book when he arrived. Late, as usual. Expensive suit, phone in hand, the look of a man who was putting in an appearance, not paying respects. He stood over the casket for maybe 30 seconds. Didn't say anything, just looked. Then he turned to his brother Kevin, my other cousin, equally entitled but less ambitious, and said something I couldn't quite hear. Both of them laughed. At a funeral, standing over their uncle's body. They laughed. I wanted to say something, should have said something, but I'd spent my whole life keeping the peace in this family, smoothing over conflicts, pretending pretending everything was fine. Old habits die hard. Some of us just don't die at all. The funeral was Saturday at 2 p.m. Morrison and Sons was packed. Uncle Richard had lived in this community for 50 years. He'd employed dozens of people, supported local businesses, been a fixture at the same coffee shop every morning since 1987. People came out of respect, out of habit, out of curiosity about who would inherit what. The service started normally enough. Hymns, prayers, a reading from Ecclesiastes. Father Michael Oyalaran, priest at St. Anthony's for 18 years, spoke about Richard's faith, his dedication to family, his quiet service to others. Then came the eulogies. My father went first, short, sincere, struggling not to cry. He talked about growing up with Richard, about the brother who'd protected him from bullies, helped him start his restaurant, never asked for anything in return. He was the best man I ever knew, Dad said, and I'll miss him every day for the rest of my life. Aunt Patricia went next. She told stories about Richard and Aunt May, his wife who died 12 years earlier, about how devoted he'd been, how he'd sat by her bedside every day for 6 months during her illness, how he'd never really recovered from losing her. Then Derek stood up and everything changed. I should have known something was wrong from the opening line. Richard Chen was a complicated man. That's how Derek started. Not, my uncle was a good man. Not, we're here to celebrate a life well lived. Just complicated. He built a successful business, Derek continued, adjusting the microphone. Made a lot of money and held on to every penny of it like his life depended on it. I saw my father stiffen in his seat. Growing up, we'd hear stories about how hard Richard worked, how he sacrificed, how he saved. Derek's voice took on an edge. What we didn't hear about was all the times family asked for help and got nothing. The graduations he missed because he was too busy. The holidays he spent counting inventory instead of being with the people who loved him. Aunt Patricia grabbed my arm. What is he doing? I don't know. Richard was generous in his own way, I suppose. He gave jobs to family members. Derek paused. Jobs with salaries that hadn't changed in 5 years. Jobs with responsibilities but no authority. Jobs that made us dependent on his approval without ever quite earning it. The room was completely silent now. Everyone frozen. No one quite believing what they were hearing. The truth is, Richard valued money more than people. He hoarded wealth while his own nephews struggled to make ends meet. He sat on millions while his brother's restaurant nearly went bankrupt. Derek looked directly at my father. But sure, let's remember him as a saint. That's what funerals are for, right? Pretending the dead were better than they actually were. I stood up. Derek, stop. Why? Because it's uncomfortable? Because you don't want to hear the truth about precious Uncle Richard? He turned back to the crowd. Here's what I learned from my uncle. Family doesn't matter. Money does. And the only good thing about today is that his money finally gets redistributed to the people who actually deserve it. He walked back to his seat like he'd delivered a TED Talk. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. And then the casket opened. The next few minutes were chaos. Uncle Richard sitting up, people screaming, the funeral director having what looked like a panic attack, paramedics arriving within minutes. Someone had called 911 immediately. Through all of it, I couldn't stop staring at Derek. His face had gone through about 6 different colors. White, red, green, back to white. He looked like a man watching his own execution in slow motion. Because Uncle Richard, even as the paramedics checked his vitals and loaded him onto a stretcher, never took his eyes off his nephew. Derek, Uncle Richard's voice was weak but clear. Come to the hospital. We need to talk. Derek looked like he wanted to run. I saw him glance at the exit, calculate his odds, but 40 people were watching, including my father, including the lawyer who managed Uncle Richard's estate. He got in his car and followed the ambulance. At Mercy General, the doctors couldn't explain it. Dr. Okonkwo, the same physician who'd signed the death certificate, ran every test in the hospital's arsenal. CT scans, EKGs, MRIs, blood panels, everything came back normal. It's called Lazarus syndrome, she finally said, or something like it. Extremely rare. His body entered a state so profound that all vital signs appeared absent. We've documented maybe a handful of cases worldwide. So he wasn't actually dead? My father asked. Clinically, yes. His heart stopped. His brain activity ceased. By every medical definition, he was deceased. She paused. And yet here he is, fully conscious, fully functional. I don't have an explanation. I do, Uncle Richard said from his hospital bed. I was too stubborn to die before I found out what Derek's been doing to my company. Everyone turned to look at him. What are you talking about? Derek asked. His voice was too loud, too defensive. I heard everything, Uncle Richard said. At the funeral, every word. Derek laughed nervously. Uncle Richard, you were dead. You couldn't have. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't open my eyes, but I could hear. His gaze locked onto Derek like a targeting system. Every single word. The room went silent. You gave quite a eulogy, nephew. Called me cheap. Said I valued money over family. Said the only good thing about today was that my money would finally go to people who deserved it. Derek's face drained of color. But that wasn't the most interesting part. Uncle Richard's voice got stronger. The most interesting part was after the service. When you and Kevin stood by my casket and talked about the company, I saw Kevin, who'd been lurking near the door, freeze. You thought no one could hear you. You talked about the invoices you've been faking for 3 years, the ghost employees you created, the expenses you padded, the salary you've been paying yourself on top of your actual salary. That's insane, Derek Derek stammered. You're confused. Whatever happened to your brain, it's making you $487,000. Uncle Richard's voice was ice. That's how much you've stolen from me. You said the exact number. Bragged about it, actually. Said the old fool never checked the books and now he never would. Derek's knees buckled slightly. He grabbed the bed rail for support. You said you were buying a Porsche next week. A 911 Carrera. Red. The same car you showed me pictures of last month and said you were thinking about getting. I don't know what you think you heard, but Derek. Uncle Richard smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. I've been awake for 2 hours. My lawyer has been busy. The door opened. Marcus Pemberton walked in. Estate attorney. 28 years of practice. The man who'd managed Uncle Richard's legal affairs since before I was born. He was carrying a thick folder. What is this? Derek's voice cracked. This, Marcus said, is the result of a forensic audit we initiated this morning. Every financial transaction at Chen Industrial Supply for the past 5 years, cross-referenced with employee records, vendor contracts, and expense reports. He opened the folder. Care to explain why 14 different vendors don't exist? Or why there are paychecks going to employees who've never set foot in the building? Or why your expense reports include $73,000 in client entertainment at restaurants that went out of business years ago? Derek looked at the door, at the window, at anything but the evidence in front of him. This is entrapment. You can't just... We can. Marcus pulled out his phone. Because at 3:47 this afternoon, while you were getting coffee in the hospital cafeteria, Detective Angela Okafor from the Financial Crimes Unit arrived with a warrant to search your office. Derek's face went from pale to gray. They found everything, Derek. The fake invoices on your hard drive, the spreadsheets tracking your theft, the offshore account where you've been stashing the money. I want a lawyer. That's probably wise. Marcus set down the folder. Because you're about to be arrested for embezzlement, fraud, and theft. The DA is estimating 8 to 12 years. Derek turned to Uncle Richard, his mask finally completely gone. You did this on purpose. You were never really dead. This whole thing was a setup. I wish I could take credit for it. Uncle Richard shook his head. But no, I genuinely collapsed. I genuinely was declared dead. And I genuinely lay in that casket listening to you trash my memory and brag about robbing me blind. He leaned forward. You did this to yourself, Derek. Every choice, every lie, every dollar you stole. I just had the unusual privilege of hearing your confession before I was supposed to be cremated. 2 uniformed officers appeared in the doorway. Derek Chen, the first officer, stepped forward. You're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and theft in excess of $100,000. You have the right to remain silent. They led him out in handcuffs. I watched him go. This cousin I'd grown up with. This man who'd sat at our Thanksgiving table every year. This person who'd stolen nearly $500,000 from the uncle who'd given him everything. He didn't look back. The aftermath unfolded over the following months. Derek's arrest made the local news. Executive arrested for embezzlement after Uncle wakes at own funeral. The headlines wrote themselves. The forensic audit revealed the full scope of his theft. $487,340 over 3 years. He'd been systematic about it, small amounts at first, then larger and larger as he grew confident no one was checking. He'd also, it turned out, been planning to challenge Uncle Richard's will, had hired a lawyer specifically to contest whatever provisions didn't favor him, had been telling Kevin for months that they'd finally get what they deserved once the old man was gone. Kevin, for his part, was implicated in some of the scheme. He'd signed off on several fraudulent invoices as a favor to Derek. His charges were lesser, accessory after the fact, failure to report, but enough to end his career at the company. The trial was swift. Derek's computer had everything. Spreadsheets tracking every fake invoice, emails coordinating with vendors who didn't exist, even a draft business plan for what he'd do with his inheritance after Uncle Richard died. He pleaded guilty to reduced charges, received 7 years in federal prison. Uncle Richard sat in the courtroom every day. I wanted him to see my face, he told me afterward. Every time he looked up, I wanted him to remember whose trust he violated. Are you satisfied? He thought about it. No, he was family. I gave him a job, a salary, a future, and he stole from me while smiling at Thanksgiving dinner. He shook his head. But I'm at peace with the outcome. That's different from satisfied. Uncle Richard lived another 4 years after his resurrection. The medical community never fully explained what happened to him. Dr. Okonkwo published a paper about it. Profound hypothermic response mimicking death in a geriatric patient. But even she admitted the case defied conventional understanding. Some things, she told me once, medicine can't explain. We just accept them and move on. Uncle Richard used those extra years well. He restructured his company, installing new oversight systems that would prevent anyone from doing what Derek had done. He increased wages for long-term employees, created a scholarship fund for their children, and he changed his will. The bulk of his estate went to charity, the same organizations he'd been supporting anonymously for years. A significant portion went to my father to pay back the loan that had never been a loan. Educational trusts for all the grandchildren in the family. Derek and Kevin got nothing, not a penny. Let them contest it, Uncle Richard said when he signed the documents. Let them explain to a judge why they deserve anything from a man they stole from and slandered. They never contested. They knew better. Uncle Richard died for real on a Thursday morning in October, 4 years after his funeral rehearsal. This time, there was no confusion. His heart gave out quietly in his sleep. The doctors confirmed it immediately. The funeral home, a different one, handled everything with appropriate caution. Check 3 times, my father told them. Then check again. They did. The second funeral was smaller, more intimate. No eulogies from estranged nephews. Just family and close friends gathered to say goodbye to a man who'd earned his rest. I spoke this time. Richard Chen taught me something important, I said, standing at the podium. He taught me that character is revealed in the moments when we think no one is watching, that integrity matters more than reputation, and that sometimes the universe gives us exactly what we need to see the truth, even if it takes a miracle to do it. I looked at the casket, closed this time, at his request. He also taught me to never ever talk badly about someone at their funeral, because you never know who might be listening. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. My father smiled through his tears, and somewhere, I like to think, Uncle Richard was smiling too. Derek got out of prison after 5 years, with good behavior. I heard he moved to another state, started over, changed his last name. Kevin drifted away from the family entirely. We don't speak anymore. The company Uncle Richard built still operates. Different management now. My father sits on the board, making sure the culture stays true to what his brother created. And every Thanksgiving, when we gather around the table, someone inevitably tells the story of the uncle who woke up at his own funeral. It gets more dramatic with each retelling. The scream that shook the windows, the priest who fainted, the nephew who turned white as a ghost. But the core of it stays the same. A reminder that the dead have ears. The truth has a way of surfacing, and you should never, ever assume you're safe just because someone stopped breathing.